Center for Internet Society for having us here. It's our first time in Bangalore, so really excited. And thanks to all of you for being our audience. So as Maria noted, today we'll talk about kind of the general program areas for the Citizen Lab and also some of our current research on censorship and surveillance around the world. So the Citizen Lab is an interdisciplinary laboratory based at the Monk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto. We were founded in 2001 by our director, Ron Deaver. And at a high level, we focus on three main areas: research, which we'll primarily talk about today, capacity building, and policy engagement. So I'll just briefly go over our programs in capacity building and policy engagement, then we'll get into the research. So throughout the history of the Citizen Lab, we have engaged in capacity building by helping form and support research networks based in the Global South. And the collaboration with these partners is really crucial for the research that we do. One primary example of that is a project that we helped start called the OpenNet Initiative, which is an inter-university consortium that was started in the early 2000s between ourselves at the University of Toronto, Harvard University, and University of Cambridge. And the objective of the OpenNet Initiative is to document internet filtering around the world. And to do that properly, we really depend on expertise from researchers and advocates in the regions and countries that we're looking at. So to help create that collaboration with those kinds of individuals, we've helped form and support two networks. The first network is called OpenNet Eurasia. That includes a diverse range of lawyers, researchers, practitioners from across the Commonwealth of Independent States region. And that network was really started at the beginning of the OpenNet Initiative around 2003. Another network that we started in 2007 with the support of the International Development Research Center in Canada is called OpenNet Asia. And similar to OpenNet Eurasia, that includes researchers and advocates from across the Asian region working on surveillance and censorship. So the interaction with these networks is really complementary. They add important context and expertise into the research we're doing, and we collaborate with them to help build capacity on research and advocacy in those regions. Recently, again with the support of the International Development Research Center, we started a new network called the Cyber Stewards Network. And this name plays on the concept of stewardship and explores what an ethic of responsible behavior is in a shared communication space like the internet. So unlike our previous networks, which were regional, this network is global and includes partners from Asia, Africa, Middle East and North Africa, and Latin America. And Center for Internet Society is one of the partners in that network. And together, what we're trying to do is articulate what cybersecurity means for the partners from the context of their country and region, and try to build out a dialogue and a conversation about it that is coming from the Global South rather than a transatlantic dialogue, which really dominates current discourse around cybersecurity. So that's our that's our capacity building area. On policy engagement, we're doing a number of things. Just briefly tell about one of our most important aspects of that program, which is an annual conference we have every March in Toronto. We're just going into next year to have our fourth installment of it called the Cyber Dialogue. And the purpose of the Cyber Dialogue is to have a forum where stakeholders from government, private sector, academia, and civil society can come together to discuss pressing issues around internet governance and security, and helps create a trusted space where we can exchange ideas and dialogue around these issues. So the focus today is our research on surveillance and censorship, and a kind of signature of the lab that I think makes our research stand out a bit from other groups is our approach to this research area, which we consider kind of mixed methods approach that combines rigorous technical investigations with methodologies from social science and also analysis from legal and policy areas. And we combine all of this together to get a more holistic sense of what's happening on the internet and other information information communication technologies. So one of the prime focuses for us with this method is information controls. And we define information controls as actions conducted in and through information communication technologies that seek to deny, disrupt, manipulate, or monitor information for political ends. So to better capture what we mean by that, I'll just show you a selection of some information controls, and each one of these categories of them have a different objective. So some information controls are designed to deny information. Perhaps one of the most common examples of information denial is internet censorship. So in many countries around the world, when you try to access certain content online, you're greeted with a block page. These are some examples of block pages around the world. And countries differ in what they put on their block pages and how they implement filtering. So this is an example from Saudi Arabia that I think is interesting. So it says access to this URL is not allowed. But then it gives a kind of ability for the user to interact with the authorities around the censorship. So it says, please fill out the form below if you believe the requested page should not be blocked. And then there's a link for doing that. And then underneath that it says, please send other sites you feel should be blocked using the following form. So this is kind of interesting because it gives some level of transparency and some way for users to give feedback to authorities. In other countries, users may not even see a block page. And when they try to access filtered content, the page is simply hanged. They might get what appears to be a 404 error or other indications that don't give any real sense that this page has been intentionally blocked by authorities and may appear to be some kind of conventional network error. So as I mentioned before, we've been doing a lot of research on internet filtering for really the past decade as part of the OpenNet initiative and within our group. And when we started the OpenNet initiative with our partners and first started our research in this area, really only a handful of countries were conducting internet filtering. Since that time, we've tested for internet filtering in over 74 countries around the world and have found that 42 states, including importantly both democratic and authoritarian states, have some level of filtering present. And that's just within our sample. There may be more countries beyond that. So what we feel we've witnessed in the past 10 years of doing this research is a steady increase of filtering around the world, and really see internet censorship as becoming a growing and pervasive global norm. So just as there's many different ways of implementing filtering technically and many different ways of communicating that filtering to users, there's also many different reasons why states may implement filtering, what their motivations for it are. These are some of the most common ones we see: appeals to national security, appeals to public morality. It could also be based on economic interests, concerns around copyright, and also in some cases to control political dissent in the country. So internet filtering is just one example of information denial. There's many others, just kind of two that we're very interested in. One is denial of service attacks, and just at a basic level, this is when your website is flooded with more requests than it can handle, and which effectively disrupts access to that website at that point period. And this has been used as a tactic for cybercrime and in other instances that are not politically motivated. But what we're interested in is when a website will become under these attacks and what period that is happening. So for example, it might be the website of an opposition political party during an election. So at a period when their information is the most valuable, when they're trying to reach the greatest audience and most users, and all of a sudden their website comes under a denial of service attack, they're not able to distribute that information anymore. Or it might be the website of an activist group around a sensitive anniversary of a political event, and right when they're doing their heightened amount of campaigning, want to reach the widest audience, and their website is not able to serve content. Importantly, information can be denied in ways that are non-technical, so the use of law and regulation to censor content online, broad use of libel and slander law are just examples of how that can be done. So that's kind of the information denial category. Other kinds of information controls seek to manipulate information or to project a message that might be counter to what a user or an organization is trying to convey on the internet. So these are just two examples. One's called a defacement attack. In a defacement attack, a website is compromised, it's broken into, and the visual content of the site is changed. And again, we've seen this tactic used in cybercrime. We've seen it used as a kind of digital graffiti on the internet. Sometimes attackers will compromise a site and put up a humorous message to show, we popped your website and this is my handle. But increasingly we've seen it being used on politically motivated attacks. So this is an example from 2008. The website Syrian, who's a prominent Tibetan blogger, was compromised and defaced by attackers based in China, and they left this image behind instead of her usual website content. And the headline of this defacement reads, "Long live the People's Republic of China, down with all Tibetan independence elements." So in this case, you can see how the website of a prominent blogger and activist is vandalized, essentially, with a message that goes against what her website is trying to convey. Recently, we've been tracking the activities of a group called the Syrian Electronic Army, which is a group active online, which is pro-Assad regime in Syria, and they've been very active during all of the events in Syria. Some of their activities include defacing websites and leaving messages that are pro-regime. So this is one of the more high-profile websites that they were able to break into and leave a message on of Harvard University. And we've been tracking these for a couple of years. Another thing that this group does is spread pro-regime messages on social media. So this is an example of President Obama's Facebook page and a stream of messages that are pro-regime coming in that the group claims they organized. So that was the information manipulation category, and then we move to another category that we really have a lot of research going on and is an object of concern for us, which is information monitoring. So information can be monitored in a number of different ways. Passive surveillance, which you see there, refers to the mass collection of information. So the recent leaks around the NSA's PRISM program of mass surveillance is a good example of this kind of monitoring. Our research in the past years has been focused on another kind of surveillance, which is in the form of targeted malware. So what is targeted malware? Targeted malware is malware attacks that are designed to target specific individuals or groups. Usually this is done through an email. It can be addressed specifically to the individual or to the group. It has content that is relevant for what they're doing. For example, if you're a Tibetan activist, it might reference a current campaign around the Tibetan movement or an event of interest. And what the message is trying to make you do is open a document or a link that contains malware. So what does the malware do? So if you compare targeted malware to other more routine malware attacks that are going after, say, your banking information or your password to your bank account, this malware is different. The objective of targeted malware is essentially to steal files, spy on users through their peripheral devices, through their webcam, through their microphones, to record your keystrokes, and to do this over a long period of time, and to maintain persistent presence on networks and do it silently. So really the objective of targeted malware is to spy on users, spy on your computer, spy on the networks of your organization. Importantly, these kinds of attacks are not isolated, they're campaigns. And if you are an individual user or belong to a group that is under attack from a targeted malware campaign, you are getting consistent attempts to compromise your network all the time. These kind of attacks affect governments, they affect big business, and they affect civil society. So our interest in targeted malware and its effects on civil society and the greater effects on international relations really peaked with this report tracking GhostNet from 2009. Which was led by our colleagues Highvalue and Craig Walton. And this report started here in India in Dharamsala with the Tibetan community. And Greg Walton, our colleague, had been working with that community for a number of years. And for this report, he conducted the collection of technical samples from Tibetan institutions that had concerns regarding computer security. These institutions included the private office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the Tibetan government in exile, and a number of Tibetan non-governmental organizations. So through this fieldwork and lab investigations conducted by Narvilnu, we uncovered a massive cyber espionage network with a reach that went beyond the Tibetan community. So the way that this network worked was it was enabled through targeted malware. And what the attackers did is they used socially engineered emails to lure target victims into clicking on attachments that contained malware and then gaining control over the compromised system. So what you see here is a real example that was used in one of the attacks. You can see the message is professionally written. It's related to issues in the Tibetan community. And if you're working within this community and on these issues, it might look like a message that you would click. If a user then clicked the attachment, it would compromise the computer and download a remote access Trojan called GhostRat, which gives the attacker real-time control over the compromised system. So this is the user interface that the attacker would see for GhostRat. GhostRat is actually an open source program. You could download it right now and probably Google for it. And it's what's referred to as a remote access Trojan, which essentially gives a remote user full control over a target computer. So you can see the commands that the attackers could do. They could steal files, they could do screen captures, they could run a keylogger to record all of the keystrokes, they could turn on the microphone, they could turn on the webcam. So they essentially turn the computer of the user into a feature-rich spying tool for them. So as I noted, the institutions in the Tibetan community were compromised by this malware, but what we're able to find through our technical investigation is that actually 1,295 computers were infected by this malware in over 103 countries. Significantly, close to 30% of the infected computers can be considered high-value targets. And this included ministries of foreign affairs for countries around the world, including Iran, Bangladesh, Latvia, Indonesia, Philippines, Brunei, Barbados, embassies of India, South Korea, Indonesia, Romania, Cyprus, Malta, Thailand, list goes on. So the malware used in these attacks communicated back to servers based in China. However, we're not able to conclusively determine the identity of the attackers behind this campaign, or what their link may or may not be to the government of China. But given the high-value targets that you see listed here, a selection of them, and the capabilities that they had through the program I just showed you, we definitely concluded that the objective of this network was political espionage. So that was in 2009. We've been continuing this work since then, and what we really are focusing on are what is the impact of these kinds of attacks on civil society. And civil society is very much under threat from targeted malware and the whole list of other information controls that I listed there. So we've been running a study for the past 2 years where we've been enrolling a diverse range of human rights groups and other groups from civil society communities and collecting technical samples from them of targeted malware attacks like the one I just showed you, running interviews with them and surveys to understand the context behind these attacks, how do they use technology in their everyday workflow, and how do these kind of threats affect what they're doing, affect the campaigns they're doing, what impact does it have on the organizations. And so we're trying to analyze the technical, social, and political dimensions of the threats, and really address a kind of lack of research attention to civil society. These kinds of attacks have hit really big targets from Google, RSA, governments around the world, entities that have a lot of resources and financial capability to run investigations, to hire companies to do incident response. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, you have civil society groups. Some of these groups may not have a physical office, they may not have a system administrator, they might be literally 5 people with laptops working out of their homes, and yet they're as targeted, or perhaps even more targeted, than groups with much more resources. So what we're trying to do in this work is raise awareness of these threats, put out information that we hope can be used both within civil society communities and help inform a broader community outside of them. So we'll have a comprehensive report on the last 2 years of this work coming out by the end of the summer. So another kind of dimension to all of those threats that I showed you, that selection of them, is the market and use of commercial filtering and surveillance products that can enable it. And I'll turn now to Jacob, who's doing a lot of work particularly on commercial products that enable internet filtering.
Hey, thanks. So this is just a sample of some of the companies that we've been looking at in the last 5 or so years of doing this sort of work that provide filtering products to be used worldwide. Fortinet's from Germany, Bluecoat WebSense is from America, and NetSweeper is actually based out of Canada. And so I'd like to go through some of the general methodology that we use to fingerprint and find different filtering devices all across the world. The first is the most straightforward, which is just a straight scan for signatures. So we have some idea, we look at installations of the products in other places, we have a look at how they would look like from the outside, and we just look for it by just scanning. There's a lot of problems with this sort of methodology. For one, it doesn't scale at all. If you don't have a good idea about where to look, the chances of you finding it are very slim. It takes a long time, and again, if it's not narrowed down, it might take days, weeks, months. And the other one is you also have to sort through a lot of false data, because you basically have to scan computers that have nothing to do with filtering in order to get to that sort of thing. So it's a problem that this is one of the things that are done. But we've actually yielded some interesting results doing targeted scanning based on information that we receive from in-country. An example of this is this, which is a traffic graph interface that was installed on the ISP of the Syrian Computer Society, which was an ISP which was linked to the Assad regime. And in late 2011 to early 2012, this was found by network scans in Syrian computer space. And you can see here, this shows the names of the devices were blue code, which coincides with one of the filtering products that are used. And if we take a look here, we actually see in the last bit, the number scale is much, much higher, indicating that a large amount of traffic that would not coincide with, say, an office or an educational facility where the installation of this might be to prevent employees from accessing certain sites. So this is a case of scanning being used to find something. Because a lot of these devices, they don't indicate that the regime is being used to filter content, because these devices have dual uses. There's a lot of legitimate reasons why somebody would buy a blue coat device and put it in their place of business, for instance. So that's an example of just scanning websites and scanning networks to try to find this sort of information. We can kind of address these problems by using a scanning service. So one that we've used in past research is Trojan, which is a search engine, not unlike Google, where you can search for fingerprints of devices that are just connected to the internet. And here's an example of a search done on Trojan yesterday, which looks for the product NetSweeper, which was found in different countries. And you can see we already have 301 installations in different countries, including the United Arab Emirates, where. And another way that we can try to find these devices is using public data. So this example is the Internet Census 2012, which is a public data set that was undertaken by an anonymous researcher that sought to scan every single public-facing internet device on the internet. He did so by using a botnet, and the anonymous researcher had stated that even though the method that this was undertaken was by a botnet, that they had taken steps such as rate limiting and non-permanence, so that an infected device upon restart wouldn't the actual botnet code wouldn't restart, but actually provides a unique source of research data, because In the late 2012, it shows all the internet-connected devices, and it kind of addresses, again, one of the problems with scanning individual hosts, because we wouldn't have to scan individual hosts. We have something that we can search by entirely. Other uses of public data that might be a little less common is this. So, I mean, this is a block page that was found in the country of Oman. The ISP is Omantel, which is the state-owned ISP. And the URL is block.om, and it shows, you know, the site's been blocked to content that's contrary to the laws of the Sultanate. And if we take a look at Alexa, Alexa is a web information company that shows most popular content by countries. So if we look at the top sites in Oman, we see number 1 is YouTube, number 2 is Facebook. But and if we go down a little bit, just a little bit below Wikipedia, we actually see the block site, block.om, is one of the most popular sites in Oman. So it's a little interesting, and another example of where we can use public information to corroborate and find evidence of filtering. So here is a sample list of websites that have been blocked in this country, in India. And the majority of these sites have been blocked because they were related to file sharing and the distribution of you know, Hindi music and that sort of thing. And I wanted to use this example to kind of highlight that a lot of the filtering that we see has a lot of unintended consequences. So if we take a look at this, all the URLs are more or less related to file sharing content, and I wanted to highlight this one, which is indiebay.org. Indiebay.org, if you had visited in late 2012, you would get something like this, which says the URL has been blocked until further notice, pursuant to court orders at the directions of the issued by the Department of Telecommunications, which is something I'm sure everybody in this room has seen. I just checked it yesterday, and you actually get a blank page. If you kind of look at the source, it doesn't have anything at all. So even the very sparse information that you were given in late 2012, you don't get any longer. The interesting thing about indiebay.org is that it's not a file sharing site at all. Actually, it's a activist kind of site based in the San Francisco Bay region. And I've always thought that the reason they blocked it is they kind of thought it was the Indian Pirate Bay, like Indie Bay, but it's not at all. If you visit it, as I did yesterday, through a proxy, it's just a regular site. And so that's an example of a completely unintended consequence of filtering. Another one is related to a report that we put out last year, which is we found evidence that Indian block pages were seen in the country of Oman. And after researching this a little bit, we actually found that if you trace route, or if you try to look at the path that a user in Oman would do to access content that is blocked, so in this case, he's trying to look for a site that's related to file sharing, you'll see that the file routes through Airtel, so we found that Bharti Airtel was providing upstream internet service to Omantel, and as a result, users in Oman were subject not only to the filtering and controls imposed by their own government, but also that of India. So quite recently, the kind of work that we've been doing is we've been trying to identify commercial filtering devices. So a common problem we'll run into is we have some idea that proxies are blocked in a given country, right? And what can we do to determine which product is being used? So in the past, this was actually really easy. We would just go to the site, the block page, and it would just tell you right there. It's like McAfee Smart Filter, that's being used for filtering. But nowadays, your block page is more likely to be like this, where it doesn't actually tell you which product it is, and it tries to obfuscate the actual thing that's being used. They customize the block pages to be for a particular thing. So one of the methods we've been playing around with is we create, in this instance, 10 domains and 10 proxy websites, completely different. And we check if they're blocked in country X. Since these are newly created sites, these would not be blocked, okay? So we take 5 of those domains, and we would submit them for classification. A lot of these filtering products have websites that you can submit information in order so that they can analyze the contents of the website and give them a category. Since these are, in this instance, it's proxy sites, we would hope that eventually, after some time, these would be classified as proxies. And then we don't do anything with the remaining 5, which kind of uses this as a control group. And then we compare the 2 results. And if we see that for some, when it hasn't started, nothing was blocked, now all of a sudden only 5 of those are blocked, but the rest are remain, we know for certain, or we have a very good indication that this product is being used in this country. So we use these kind of techniques to try to determine which products are being used in which country. So as a result of this, we had a few results. We have Canadian company NetSweeper was found to be in Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. McAfee Smart Filter had used to be involved in Saudi Arabia, and Bluecoat was present in the networks of Syria, Burma, as well as currently in Saudi Arabia. And we actually put this out recently on a map. So this map was done by using data from the Trojan search engine to find installations of Packet Shaper, which is a surveillance product, and Proxy SG, which is a filtering product, and to try to find the intersection between installation locations and where it's present. So these are the kind of techniques we've been doing recently, and take that.
So that's on the use of products for filtering and looking at that market. And another market we've been really interested in is for surveillance technology. So this is a poster of ISS World, which is the premier conference for vendors providing surveillance technology. And it's put on by a company called Telestrategies. And recently in a New York Times article, Jerry Lucas, who's the president of Telestrategies, said the market for these technologies has grown to $5 billion a year from almost nothing 10 years ago. So this is a really booming area. And you can see some of the topics that are covered in this conference, like infecting spyware, cell phone investigations, social network surveillance, monitoring encrypted traffic, and so on. Here's a slide from the conference showing what talks are about, and one of the tracks, which is encrypted traffic monitoring and IT intrusion products. So for the past year, we've been really interested in this particular area of these so-called Lawful Intercept tools. So these are tools that are extensively used by law enforcement agencies and other government agencies in investigations of criminals or terrorist behavior. And they're provided by a number of companies. Here you see some of the companies giving talks on this area, including Gamma Group and Hacking Team, which are two companies that we've been looking at closely. So as I said, we're looking at this for the past year. This research is led by our colleagues Morgan Markey-Biore, Bill Marziak, John Scott Railton, and a number of others who helped out along the way. So I'll just give a high-level overview of what we found by both looking at these companies, their products, and this wider market for surveillance. So this is the website for FinFisher, which is a suite of tools provided by Gamma Group, which is based in the UK. And they describe these tools as governmental IT intrusion and remote monitoring solutions. And you can see some of their graphics there. So this company really came into the spotlight following the Egyptian revolution, when protesters gained control of the offices of state security and were able to retrieve a number of confidential documents. So amongst these documents was this, an offer from Gamma Group to the Egyptian State Security Investigation Department for the FinFisher suite. And there you can see some of the unit prices for their tools, one of their products called FinSpy. And there's been a number of brochures and other information that's been circulated about FinFisher by WikiLeaks and an organization called Privacy International. That's given a sense of what the capabilities are. So you can see in the corner there discussions of being able to intercept covert communications, full Skype monitoring, tracking targets, extracting files, etc. So essentially this is the commercialization of the kind of targeted malware that I discussed before. So a lot of attention suddenly came on to the company after this revelation that the Egyptian government was at least been giving an offer of the product. It's not clear if they ever went beyond this offer stage. At this point in time, no one had a sample of this product in their research community. So there's still a lot of questions around its capabilities, how it worked, and so on. So in May 2012, Vernon Silver, who's a journalist with Bloomberg News, shared some pieces of malware with our lab. And these samples were emails with malware attachments that specifically targeted Bahraini activists. So you can see above there is an example of what the typical message content was of these emails that was sent in the attacks. And the files that were attached to them had malware, and that provided remote access to the victim's systems and allowed attackers to exfiltrate data from those systems. So Morgan and our colleagues did a thorough analysis of this malware, and were able to determine that this malware was likely a FinFisher for a number of different reasons, specifically the FinSpy product. So in debug strings in the affected processes, you can see a reference to FinSpy in the malware, and they were also able to compare the samples that we had been shared with from the journalist to other samples that had a lot of similar characteristics. And those samples communicated to domains belonging to the Gamma group. So we also did some research on a competitor to Gamma Group called Hacking Team. They're based in Italy. They sell a similar product called Remote Control System, and you can see their promotional material here explaining what the product can do. So very similar to the FinFisher suite. So like Gamma Group, Hacking Team claim that their products are for governmental law enforcement agencies and other agencies only. And you'll see this with a number of these kinds of companies. They claim their products are only for those clients. That conference that I showed you the slide from, you're only allowed to attend if you're a government representative or from the law enforcement community. Some companies have even gone a bit further and claim they only sell to the United States or allies of the United States. But this is the claim that these companies have for the sale of these tools, and they're used by various law enforcement agencies around the world. So this man pictured here, his name is Ahmed Mansour, and he is a democracy activist in the United Arab Emirates. On the 23rd of July, 2012, he received this message here, which purportedly is from Arabic WikiLeaks, and is urging him to open a very important message. So the attachment with this message was malicious, and again, Morgan and our colleagues analyzed it and found that it matched the characteristics of the remote control system product made by Hacking Team. Importantly, that product, samples of it had been previously discovered in the wild on the internet by other security researchers. That gave us an opportunity to compare them. So this was another example of these products being used in countries with questionable human rights records, and specifically being used to target activists. So we've also seen a campaign of the FinSpy tool, part of the FinFisher suite, that uses pictures of Jimbot 7. This is the picture that it uses, which is an Ethiopian opposition group, which has been classified by the Ethiopian government as a terrorist organization. And so this picture and content around this organization was used as a lure in the message to have users open an attachment that would contain the FinSpy malware. So this again is another example of FinSpy deployments being used with strong indications that they're politically motivated. And in this example, the instance of FinSpy communicated with a server based in Ethiopia. This is a more recent example that we found through a service called VirusTotal, in which users can upload files to the service, and then it checks how many antivirus vendors can detect the file as malicious. And it also collects all of these samples that security researchers can then use. So our colleagues found this file, which is a document that contained FinFisher, and the content of this document is in Malay and has information on the 2013 Malaysian general election. In this case, we don't know who made this lure or who is circulating it. We also don't know who was being targeted specifically by it or how many users may have been infected by it. But given the content of the document, it's in Malay, it's about the Malaysian election, we can conclude that the targets of this campaign were probably Malay speakers who had an interest in the 2013 Malaysian election. So other work our group has done on FinFisher is scanning the internet and data sources like the internet census data that Jacob mentioned for identifiers of FinFisher. So this is somewhat similar in methodology to how we try to scan for identifiers of commercial filtering products. So this map shows our most recent results of that scan, and we've identified FinFisher command and control servers in over 36 countries. So the command and control server is the server that would then send the commands to the infected host. Our most recent results include finding servers in Pakistan, Nigeria, South Africa, Panama, Turkey, along with other countries. So it's important to note with these results that just because there's the presence of a FinFisher command and control server in a country does not necessarily imply that the country's law enforcement, security, or intelligence services are operating that server or are indeed a client of FinFisher and Gamma Group. But this kind of gives you a sense of some open questions around why are there servers in some of these countries, who is using them, and for what means are they using them. And as we have uncovered through this research, we've continually seen examples of these tools being used in countries with poor human rights records and to target activists. So that was a really quick overview of over a year of research. If you go to this URL, you can download this report. For their eyes only, the commercialization of digital spying, which is over 100 pages of technical details of what I just described. This is a very active research area for us. So just to kind of review what we covered in the talk, our main research area right now is trying to understand this spectrum of information controls confronting civil society, and whether these be controls that are designed to deny information to users, to manipulate the content of information that is circulated to users, or to surveil what users are doing on the internet. They all have serious implications for civil society, for international relations, and a lot of open legal policy and technical questions about how these things are operating. One of the things that we find concerning is a civil society group could have all of these things happen to them at once. You could have your website filtered when you're trying to reach a jurisdiction that's important for you for your campaigning. You could have your social media account compromised and have some messaging on it that's embarrassing to your group or trying to ruin your reputation. You could have your site come under a denial of service attack when you're trying to get information out to your audiences. You could be under pressures of legal and regulatory authorities. And you can also be having your networks and your computers actively spied on by attackers. So we're trying to understand this full spectrum and raise awareness around it and have information that we hope can be helpful for those communities. And to add like another layer around it, there's this whole political economy and commercial market for products that enable these kinds of controls, and increasingly we're seeing evidence of them used around the world in countries with problematic human rights records. So that was just kind of a high-level overview of what we're working in the lab right now, and really invite questions or comments from all of you. So thanks for your attention.
You talked about the implication of a militarized internet on the future of the civil society. Now, how are civil society organizations countering these? How are private organizations like Google and civil society, non-profit organizations like Mozilla or W3C, how are they countering these happenings?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think there's different levels of it. Like there's things that individual users are doing to bypass censorship, for example, or like creative use of language to evade censors. So all kinds of technical and non-technical things people are doing at a user level. I think one of the positive implications of having more of this information available and just the scale of it more visible to general audiences is it gives an opportunity for civil society actors and also government and private sector to really have a conversation around what's happening. And you know, for us, a big touch point in our research was the discovery of the GhostNet network in 2009. But since then, it feels like every week there's a new story of a cyber espionage network that is targeting government or civil society or private sector actors or all of them all together. So this kind of escalation is both concerning, but I think provides a good opportunity to have a dialogue around what's happening, which is, you know, something that we try to facilitate in some of our programming.
What role do backdoors in software implementation have? Do they work together or do they happen separately? Or is it all synchronized?
Sorry, you mean like intentional backdoors in products?
Yes.
Again, I mean, I think it depends on the context of the company providing it and in which country. So, for example, we've done a lot of research on domestic products and services provided by Chinese companies, and they're under obligation to implement controls like surveillance and censorship. For example, in 2008, my colleague Nardigan discovered that TomSkype, which is the Chinese version of Skype, there were suspicions that it was implementing censorship. So if you typed in certain keywords, like say Tibet, Tiananmen Square, the user on the other side wouldn't see it. When NARD was able to find that actually when he typed in certain keywords, not only was it censoring, but it was also uploading entire chat logs to a server based in China. So that could be a kind of an example of a backdoor. And recently we've been working with colleagues at the University of New Mexico who are able to reverse engineer the TomSkype client. And for the past almost 2 years now, we've been downloading the keyword list that triggers surveillance or censorship on that client every day. So that's just an example of a product that has been known to be doing these controls since 2008 and is continuing to do it and is updating these keywords to keep up with current events. And you know, in other jurisdictions and other companies, there might be similar controls happening, and you know, that's something that can definitely have a huge impact on users and speech online and all kinds of other legal and policy questions around it.
Have you found out any correlation between the kind of countries which use these products? Let us say, for example, a country which is quite high on economic freedom or political freedom, or countries which are authoritarian with one-party rule, or which have a track record of cracking down dissent. Is there some kind of relationship which you have found between the country's political or economic freedom and then the usage of the software, or those things become independent of the usage?
So that's a really interesting question. I think one of the takeaways from our research is that both authoritarian and democratic countries are using these products, and you know, when we do scans of them, we find them around the world. One of the challenges for us, as Jacob explained, is understanding how a product that can be used for censorship but may also have a legitimate use on a network for efficiency and other aspects, whether or not it's being used for censorship. And then we can hone in on countries that have authoritarian regimes or other issues around human rights to see if they're using it for censorship. For the surveillance products, I mean, they're used by everyone. They're definitely used by democratic states, they're definitely used by authoritarian regimes as well. So one of the issues for us is when these companies claim that these products are being used by law enforcement agencies, if they're in a country with a proper rule of law, then they'd be using it under the auspices of warrants and other kinds of accountability and transparency around it, one would hope. But if they're being used in countries where the rule of law is problematic, that can be a big issue. Or if they're being used in countries where speaking out against the government or being or vocalizing dissent is considered a criminal activity, then that's another issue as well. So that's the kind of nuance around it that we're trying to explore in this research.
So earlier this year, if I remember correctly, there were some articles that came out online talking about the markets for zero-day vulnerabilities, and how a lot of governments and government contractors are sort of buying them up and gearing up for cyber warfare or what have you. But I was wondering if the Citizen Lab had done any research on those, and if so, whether it had evaluated the use of those sort of marketized vulnerabilities to target like civil society and activist groups as well.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question. So in the study I briefly described, where we've been doing this collection of samples from civil society groups for over the past 2 years, I think in that we've seen maybe 2 0 days. It hasn't been a big feature in the samples we've been getting. Interestingly, for the majority of targeted malware that we see affecting those groups, the the effort on the part of the attackers is on the social engineering. So they're tracking what the groups are doing, they know what they care about, they have like kind of mapped out their networks of groups that they contact with, and they're putting a lot of effort on that. The technical sophistication of the malware is usually lower. So for us, again, like FinFisher is kind of on top, these kinds of tools that you can tell are being developed by a professional group and a lot of effort on that. And the samples that we see from that, the majority of samples that we see targeting civil society don't have a lot of effort into obfuscating what the code is doing or protecting it from analysts, with the exception of tools like FinFisher. But it's definitely an area that we're interested in. I think this market for 0 days and so forth definitely is a key part of trying to understand the greater surveillance market out there, and all of these questions of who the clients are, what they're being used for, what that impact is for the greater security of the internet, and other policy questions is definitely something we're interested in.
What do you think are some of the stuff done by the ISPs here, or other than bandwidth capping, that really hampers everyone?
Particularly for ISPs in India?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, Jacob, do you have any comments on that? I haven't, we haven't actually done tests in India since 2011, so we're hoping to get some more information and learn from all of you of what some concerns might be there, but
It's just no information is on block pages.
right, as it changes. So, I mean, we're really keen to learn from all of you of what's happening here and what issues you're concerned about.
Any more questions, concerns, comments, ideas? Okay, then we can wrap it up. Okay, thank you very much for coming here. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to all of you for attending. And there's a guest book which I think is going around somewhere. If you can please take like, I don't know, a few seconds, just fill it in, that would be really great. And thanks a lot, and any feedback, just send to say yes or just says that.